Alright, welcome everybody to a very special episode and a project that's been very close to my heart for some time. It still really doesn't feel real. I'm finally getting to tell you guys. Alright guys, so we're here in the Denver Public Library. We actually found out they have an undigitized photo. It might just be kind of the one everybody knows, but if we can get a little bit crisper look at it, a little bit cleaner print, that'd be awesome. So let's go see what they got. Alright, so here's the picture, so let's take a look. Alright, so our kind of stumbling down this rabbit hole of Billy the Kid mythology, lore, history, started back in 2019. This is the year that we're starting to kind of branch out into making more like dramatization type documentaries where we had people act out different scenes of like historical figures. So, you know, we had a Houdini one we're working on. We want to do one on Nikola Tesla. And of course we did some filming with Jeremy Anderson as Billy the Kid and Grayson Klein as Pat Garrett.
Sounds good.
Now, for those of you who don't know me, when I go to make a video, even just for YouTube, right, I want to read as much as I can, dive into as much as I can to get as much detailed information to really attempt to give you guys the best episode we can give you with the most up-to-date information. With history, it's hard. We're always learning stuff. But that's also what makes history fun. You know, it's never 100% set in stone, and there are still tons of new discoveries to be found. And so much like any other episode, I was diving into a ton of Billy the Kid books. Now, once you get past an authenticated life of Billy the Kid and a lot around that time frame, or a lot of early ones that were maybe pseudo copycats or copycats of Pat Garrett and Ash Upson's work in that one, you start to find some more books that really humanize him and tell you more of the actual history with a lot more knowledge. You know, it's written in a time where we have a lot easier ways to access information than of course Pat did when he wrote his book, or Ash Upson when he wrote his portions. So we'll jump ahead a little bit. In 2021, the same year we actually started filming with Jeremy and Grayson, I had received a book for my birthday from my daughter called Billy the Kid, An Endless Ride by Michael Wallace. And at the point of reading this one, it was by far the most demythologized one that I had read, and one that made him feel the most human and not legend or myth. You know, and also around this time, you know, there's a really nice episode, Wild West, with Billy the Kid, and the historical portions of Jarrell's portrayal as Billy in Billy the Kid New Evidence really started to change my perception of who Billy was. You know, if you have only Young Guns and Authenticated Life of Billy the Kid, and maybe some of these other kind of mainstream ones, you get a very vastly different picture of who Billy was. But back to our story. I'm reading this book, and I get to a portion where it does talk about Denver. There's a picture of Denver. You know, eventually Joe Antrim's name in Denver pops up. So I take notes and just keep going, keep reading. Really just using it for something for further research, because unlike a lot of these locations, like say a Wichita, which honestly isn't too bad, or, you know, Fort Sumner, Lincoln, which can't complain, we're there every year at this point. So I'm sure if you guys are there at some point, you'll see us. To find a possibility of locations here in Colorado really intrigued me, because hey, it's our own backyard, super easy, and it's a little bit different than what you see. You know, we don't really hear the Colorado portions, and I was like, at some point, let's dig into that more. And eventually I was able to find some information on Joe Antrim, and that he died here in Denver. And of course, we visited Billy's grave, and we wanted to pay our respects to Joe. You know, maybe he's not as big of a name as Billy, but he's still part of that story, and it's just something we wanted to do. And so, I don't know, I went to Google and typed in Joe's name, and Find a Grave pops up. It's a website. It's very handy. We've used it a ton. And, it's helped us find marked but unmarked graves like Lee Harvey Oswald, which is marked but not really marked, as well as other graves that are marked. We just don't know where to go in some of these really big cemeteries. So I clicked it, and all it says is donated to medical school, specifically Colorado Medical School. And I thought it was odd. It was, over 90 years since Joe had died. I for sure thought we would find something. Like, we had to know something, right? Like, where was he buried? Now, the Find a Grave page did showcase a different picture than the one I had seen. Usually you see the older news article photo, which we showcased at the beginning of this video that we got to go see, of a much older, weathered Joe Antrim. This one showed a young one, so I was like, maybe I had the wrong one. So of course I go up and search Antrim 1930, and some pop up, and I go down to like the J section, and there's the same page, Joe C. Antrim. And so I was like, oh, that's quite odd, again, how do we not know where he's buried? So back to Google it was. And I'm searching like, where's Joe Antrim buried in Colorado? And article after article, it all says the same thing. Donated to the medical school. And it's kind of like, that's it. That's all she wrote. Alright guys, so we find ourselves here just off Colorado Boulevard on 9th Avenue. This is where the old mortuary was, where they would hold the unclaimed dead that we've obviously been talking about this whole time. So this was the address 4200 East 9th Avenue that was listed on the Rocky Mountain newspaper on both December 4th and 8th. Today, this is an open park, lots of dogs around here, people walking their dogs, just enjoying quite a beautiful day down here in Denver. But yeah, this is where Joe's body was, and kind of where the story ended for so long, was this plot of land. It's kind of neat coming to. It's not the location of his grave, obviously, but for so long this is kind of where the story ended, so it still kind of has that feel of hollowed ground. Kind of early on, there was a point I really kind of thought perhaps he was on someone's display shelf, because there's an antique shop that turned into like an actual storefront on Colfax that had skulls from the medical school. I don't think all of them were from ours, but there was one that was like 60s, 70s Mel, and I was like, oh. I really worried that was Joe's fate. I asked the owner at that time, and the person had died in the early 1900s, so earlier than Joe, and so luckily not Joe. Unfortunately, still somebody whose remains are on someone's shelf somewhere now. Being that was a few years ago, I'm sure it's sold, and it's kind of an odd thing. And it was while reading our buddy James Mills' book, Billy the Kid, El Bandito Simpatico, which if you haven't read it, go read it, it's fantastic. That I really concretely said, no, this is it, we're just going to make an episode on Joe and release it November 2024. So fast forward a little bit, I had been asked to join the Chasing Billy show live with James Townsend and Josh Slatton of the Billy the Kid Historical Coalition, and of course Joe Antrim pops up because we're from Colorado, and James is talking a little bit, and that's when I tell a little bit of our research, and that's really when this whole thing came together of, hey, maybe let's re-look at some stuff. Maybe there's something out there. 100% honest, didn't think we would find anything. This was pre us going to Roswell this past summer, so I said, hey, I'll research it and see what I can find. Maybe we're in Colorado, we'll go to Denver libraries, see what we can dig up, see what they got in the Historical Society. Maybe something's been missed, but we're going down to Roswell, so it's going to have to wait till after that. And so it became which cemetery could it be. Well, luckily, City Cemetery, which is still under Cheeseman Park to this day, there's like a couple thousand bodies, 3,000, something like that. Luckily, that switched over in the late 1800s, early 1900s, so Joe's not under a park with dogs and people running all over. So the other kind of two old ones are Riverside and Fairmount, kind of around the Denver area, Denver, Aurora. Now, to kind of speed up this process, because there's a lot that goes into it, and I did write an article, so if you want the full in-depth thing, I'll tell you at the end where to find that. But I did end up reaching out to Denver Public Library to find out more about burial records, maybe at Fairmount or Riverside, as well as the cemeteries themselves. And then I also reached out regarding just information on Joe. I did get something back from Denver Public Libraries on Joe Antrim and went through it. A lot of it is stuff that was showcased, but there was also like the unclaimed dead articles from December 4th and 8th. So post-dated his death, where he died November 25th, 1930. There was also something that kind of intrigued me. Was it looked like in 1952 somebody attempted to trace the McCarty family and had actually called the school. It said A. Freeze traces McCarty family, and this was done in 1952. And I found it just really odd. How, if he had died in 1930, 22 years later, do we still not know, especially if they had called the medical school? Like, to me, that felt odd. But unfortunately, with like nothing kind of coming from that search, I did go to Google and searched where does the Colorado Medical School bury cadavers, and it came up with the more recent. It's buried in Fairmount Cemetery. If you were to donate your body to medical science today, there is a plot that they own. This coming straight from their official website. Of course, was it always Fairmount? Because on their website it does show that they were founded in Boulder. Obviously, that's where the University of Colorado is located. And so I went back and found an article where it said that cadavers were actually buried in Columbia Cemetery, the same cemetery that the infamous, famous Tom Horn is buried at. And of course, I kept browsing the different articles I could find and sources I could find, but really that's all I had was Fairmount or Columbia Cemetery. So I was like, hey, that's better than nothing. We're kind of narrowed down to two. Unfortunately, they are on vastly different sides of Colorado, both roughly about 30 plus minutes away from Denver proper. So it was going to be quite the trip to visit both of them. But hey, that's what we like to do, so that was our goal. Now, before heading out, I had also found a phone number to the anatomical board. I had talked to the receptionist, kind of explained what we were doing. We were just looking for some information on Joe Antrim, when he was received by the school. It looks like November 29th. He had died on November 25th. We do have records of him being among the unclaimed dead on December 4th and December 8th at the location in Denver. And I was trying to confirm A, it went to that school, and B, would have been Riverside or Columbia Cemetery where his remains were placed, because those were the only two records that I had. So I ended up leaving all that in a message for a lady that works there, and we set off. Let's try to find out and see what we could find. Alright, so we are in Columbia Cemetery, one of two locations based on records that we have right now that show where they've buried bodies from the school. Now, the ones here, it does say that they buried actual parts of the bodies. Stop 2, which will be Fairmount, says it was cremated, and so we're just trying to figure out where this location is, so we'll update you shortly. This might make sense, because none of these people are related. They're very closely together. Their part 2. Alright, so we're currently in the Columbia Cemetery here in Boulder, Colorado. For any Wild West fans, it's the same cemetery that Tom Horn is buried in. So it's a name you guys should recognize. We're up here, stop one, trying to figure out where the cadavers from the CU Medical School were buried. Because up here they were actually buried, usually in small boxes. But unfortunately, it does not seem like there is any headstones currently marking where this happened, at least that we've been able to find. We're going to make one more stop, but another thing with this one too that maybe can rule this out as a location is the school did move to Denver in 1924. So a few years before Joe Antrim passed away. So we might be able to kind of just scratch this one off and say he wouldn't be buried up here. Maybe this just leaves Fairmount, so we'll have to go down there and try to dig up some records. So, journey continues. So Columbia Cemetery, super beautiful up there. Obviously Boulder and the Flatirons, beautiful location. A lot of really cool old headstones. So if you love history, you're going to enjoy walking around there. As previously mentioned, Tom Horn is buried there, as well as remains of the cadavers used for medical science. We had also found some very of-the-time pictures of students posing with skeletons or cadavers. One of them, they were like holding him, like the cadaver was like hanging out and chilling. And I was like, man, could you imagine if that was the right time to be Joe? That was like the final picture of Joe Antrim or something. But unfortunately, the medical school completely moved out of Boulder in the early 1920s, so still pre-Joe's death. So it obviously wouldn't make sense for them to haul remains of a cadaver all the way up to Boulder from downtown Denver. So that really kind of just left Fairmount Cemetery. So we had to head over there. And the goal when we went to Fairmount was to just get some concrete dates. Like, could we find out when that plot was being used? Was it 1930 on? Was it earlier? We just wanted to find the time range, because obviously if it's the right time of when Joe was donated, then voila. Alright, so now we find ourselves in Fairmount Cemetery. This one's a little bit easier as far as finding where the anatomical board cremations have been placed. And as far as the information we have, it is still ongoing today. We're not sure still if this is where Joe is. We got to go talk to him. They said there's people in the mausoleum here, so we're going to go talk to him and at least try to find out the years that they started here. We did kind of rule out Boulder just because they moved at 1924, it sounds like, so we can kind of safely say Joe is not up in Boulder. Could he be right here? That's what we're trying to find out. So we're going to go inside and let you guys know. Alright, so we did talk to the gentleman with inside the mausoleum today. It seems like he wasn't sure the date for certain, but he says the plot that we showed you is going to be too new to be where Joe is most likely buried, because he says it's probably within the last 20 or so years, so definitely far too new. So we actually reached out to the groundskeeper. Unfortunately, he's not there today, or just unable to take the call right away. So we did leave a message. So as soon as we hear back from him, hopefully we'll be able to give you guys a better date for certain. But until then, we're at a library because That's where research is done, guys. This is a long process. So it's been about, I don't know, 3 years-ish that we've been really searching for Joe, and I thought we were so close, too. I don't know. Just don't know. We'll figure it out. So Fairmount, we stopped at like the visitor main office right when you pull in. It's a huge cemetery. It, along with Riverside, are our two oldest active cemeteries in Colorado. And luckily for us and our research, they have the records to Riverside as well. So while we were there, we asked A, where the anatomical, marker was, so we knew where to go right away. And B, if they could help us find a Joe Antrim. Now, they had no record of Joe Antrim at either of them. There were some other Antrims, but not the right time, age, name, or anything like that. So not who we were looking for. And also, they didn't mention that there was any medical burials at Riverside, so that's that. But when we asked them the time range of when this plot was used, they told us, well, you can go ask the people in the mausoleum, or you're going to have to talk to the school, which is like, oh, it's kind of weird. Like, you feel like, hey, at least they could be like, yeah, it started used such and such. So he ended up at the mausoleum, and he was like, yeah, it's much newer in the last 20, 30 years or something like that. I was like, well, that's well outside of the range of Joe. And I really, at this point, I was just like, dang. Like, both places that have any record of medical school donations are just like off the table. And so we were like, hey, let's go try some libraries. Libraries, at least in Castle Rock, really good with historical stuff. Maybe they got some records somewhere. They didn't have any historical documents at that library. So we're at another library. Douglas County is pretty good, but unfortunately I do believe this cemetery falls outside of Douglas County. So hopefully we get some information and we'll go from there.
He's pretty torn up right now. Haven't seen him this sad since they renamed the Sears Tower. But we're gonna keep hunting. We are on our way back to Castle Rock. We're gonna pick up Matt, do some other filming today. We searched a lot, but it kind of turned out to be a slight bust. But we are gonna continue the search.
We'll continue. I mean, this is part of research, unfortunately. I was really hopeful, honestly. I thought one of those two was going to be it because that's pretty much the records I could find on the internet. Colorado, I think I've said this before at the beginning. I know when I've talked to other people about embarking on this type of journey, Colorado's not the best for keeping burial records or just how they take care of the dead. We do have a park still full of 3,000 bodies. It's called Cheeseman Park. There's still people buried there, and there's probably not records of who they are. So we're not giving up. We're just, I think, as far as what day it is, we're not going to get any further today. We've left voicemails, we've left messages with quite a few people. We have reached out to like the medical school itself. I think today what we can at least rule out for sure is it's not going to be Boulder. We found out they moved down to Denver in 24, so that is definitely too early to be where Joe would have gone, so we can for sure rule that one out. So, I mean, we did accomplish something, just unfortunately our trip into Fairmount was unsuccessful. I mean, they were very helpful as far as trying to look up an Antrim as well. There was 3 or 4 I think they brought up. None of them were Joe. There was a John, but he died in the 40s, so it wouldn't have been him, unfortunately. And hopefully we just hear back from the groundskeeper. He's probably off for the rest of the day, so yeah, when we find out more, we'll record it, and you guys you'll know, because it'll be an actual episode, and we'll just be us talking into a camera. So hopefully we can find out something soon. We're still positive. It's our home state of Colorado. We want to make sure we get back. And so yeah, both libraries struck out. Obviously, the one was more of a long shot, being in Douglas County, but we figured it was worth a shot. Of course, we wouldn't be making this video if we didn't end up finding something, right? And yeah, man, I remember that call. I saw a number that wasn't in my phone. I answered it. I was like, hello. And they said, is this Keegan? I was like, yes. And they're like, were you looking for some information on Joe? And I was like, yeah. And so they confirmed that Joe Antrim went to the medical school, which we knew, but that was good. We were on the right track. But she said it wasn't Riverside Cemetery. And I was like, okay. And she said it's Pioneer Cemetery. And I was like, well, where's that, you know? And she's like, it's in like, it's really weird. It's like in the middle of a shopping center. I knew right away. Because I've driven by that so many times when we go to my Ya's house or just driving around Parker Road down to Aurora. That's like, you drive by it. And I remember always kind of being like, oh, I want to go up there and visit. And now it's like, hey, maybe it was meant to be. And I was like, almost at a loss for words. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And like, we got the confirmation that he was cremated and his cremains were put there. And I remember just getting off the phone, texting Josh and James and being like, mission accomplished, we did it. And it was outside of when the Cubs won the World Series. Like, I cried then. I felt a little teary-eyed. Like, I did get a little emotional. Like, this has been it's been a long journey, and it's something we had been told by lots of people that it would never be found, and I honestly believe that. So just to hear this is where Joe Antrim is was amazing. Alright, so we are heading to the cemetery that we just got the call on about where Mr. Joe Antrim is buried. This is like, it's really hard to kind of explain like how exciting this is that we were able to finally figure out where he was buried. It's just kind of step one, but we're gonna, wasn't our plan to come down here. We obviously we got the phone call, and now that's why we're headed here. We're just, I don't know, a couple hundred feet away. It's just on the other side of this, so give us a second, we'll be there. But
yeah, it's definitely really crazy because this was a gravesite that has not been found, or nobody really knew anything about it. I mean, there's certain things that knew about it, but as far as the exact location, that has definitely not been posted anywhere.
Yeah, and it's kind of shocking that no one has gone to the lengths to find it. I know in our research that we've been doing recently, it's at least what I found, people call the school and kind of give up there. But that was not our goal. Our goal was to try to figure out where he was. So we've shown you two other cemeteries that obviously were wrong. This one, I didn't find any records of the school put bodies here. So this was really exciting when we got the call back from the school today to find out. Now this is it. Sam's gonna pan out to our left. You can see it. It's really weird. We're actually in a shopping complex right now, and luckily it's been saved. Otherwise it could have been built up, have a shopping complex, so we're pretty lucky there. And that's it.
I've seen that movie.
Alright guys, we're walking up Melvin-Lewis Cemetery. It's very, very old, very headstone-less. There's just a few left. One of them looks newer. You can kind of see it right now. Definitely not from when this was an active cemetery. So, I'm almost a loss for words. Like, Billy the kid's brother. Like, this is, I don't even know what to say. Like, just one step. We're gonna get a marker here somehow. So. You'll see at some point in the video. I can't believe we did this. I got a little teary. You know how you said when we watched that airplane one? I understand it. Like, you put so many years into it. Like, that's been 3 years. Obviously, she put more, but it's been 3 years. Okay, so we know for sure it's not that. It's got to be that. That's the only one I see.
And I really don't even know. Like, words can't even describe how I feel. You know, this was something that we wanted to set out and try to make just a video about Joe, and to find this is I can just lost for words trying to describe like how exciting. Like I said earlier, so many times we heard we wouldn't ever find it. I didn't believe we'd find it, and when I got that phone call, it was, to this day, when like I think about telling people, I get like all shaky and nervous. Like, it's the excitement, I guess. Just being able to finally to have a little bit of finality, a little bit something better than just an empty field and nothingness, the ether. We don't know. To be Melvin-Lewis Cemetery, just words. There's no words. I don't know. A little bit about the cemetery. The school acquired it in 1957 for archaeological purposes, as well as a place to place the cremains of those who donated their bodies to science. In fact, if you go on to find a grave now that we know it's actually there, you can find that they do have a marker. Here's a picture of it that we were able to get. As well as on Find a Grave, it lists the names of some of the other people whose cremains now called out their final resting place. According to the records, there's something like 1,600 remains in this very small, very out of place cemetery that's in the middle of a shopping center, and it's only because of some really hard preservation work by the Historical Society that in 1987 it did not get bulldozed and developed. So had that happened, we would have lost it. There would have been no finality. There would have been no place to say that's where Joe Antrim is buried. So 1957, right? That's kind of odd. That's 27 years post Joe's death. Like, that seems like a really weird time. So here's kind of like looking at everything we have compiled so far. And again, this investigation is not 100% over. I'd say like we're 70, 75, like we're there. We're just waiting on some more like paperwork, I guess. And it's been kind of hard. We were able to get like the location. Obviously, I got the Melvin-Lewis Cemetery was what I was told. Sam called the school, didn't know he was affiliated with me, and he got the same answer. As of late, they've been a bit more coy, and we're not 100% sure if that's because of like legality purposes. There are contracts kind of based off of what the Fairmount Cemetery told us. There's contracts drawn up with the school, so we're not sure if that's why, because when I was talking to our contact in the school that gave us the information, she said that she would have to get it okayed with the legal board. So that's the process we're in now. It's still ongoing. But again, we go back to this 1957 time frame, and just it's very, very odd, right? It's 27 years post Joe's death. So how does that work, you know? We eliminated Fairmount because obviously 1980 is way, way too late. Why isn't 57? And so we had to take a whole look at the collection of evidence we had compiled. So we know Joe Antrim died November 25th, 1930. We know the school accepted his body on November 29th, 1930, but it was still listed on December 4th and 8th, 1930, grouped together with some of the other unclaimed dead at the mortuary, which we visited earlier in the video, at least that location. And this all kind of makes sense. In 1927, there was some more kind of laws passed, which made it so they had to actually give the living relatives some time to come and collect their family members. They didn't want a family member showing up and you're cutting open grandpa or mom, dad, uncle, whoever it was. And so they made a certain time frame. So that explains that portion. Okay, so again, 1930, 1957. Doing some research, it seems like most cadavers are used roughly about 2-3 years before they are cremated. So then you're looking more at like 1932, 1933 to 1957. So still huge amount of time. Well, what was going on in the 30s? And then what was going on in the 40s? Well, there was obviously the Great Depression and then World War II. So perhaps finding a resting place in a new cemetery between Columbia and Fairmount wasn't the top priority at that time. There are some records showcasing that there was some hardships going on. Staff was being cut, salaries were being cut, cadavers might have been used longer. So again, that might open up the window of when Joe was used as part of the curriculum at the School of Medicine. And then I think back, there was that really kind of interesting thing we found via the Denver Public Libraries, where in 1952 they were trying to trace Joe Antrim and had called the school. So if they had called the school in 1952 and he had already been buried, why didn't we already know that? Like, if you've been placed anywhere, if they had thrown out his remains, if they sold his remains, whatever, misplaced them, why don't we have more records about that, right? Well, the school didn't come into possession of the cemetery till 1957, and his cremains weren't placed there until obviously 1957. That would explain why in 1952 they didn't have a final resting place, because he was still at the school. His cremains were with a batch of others. Kind of based on the conversations, it seems like there was kind of a mass cremain like thing, which Joe's cremains would have been put in and then placed at the Melvin-Lewis when they came into possession. And like I said, this is still ongoing. It's not 100% final. We're pretty close. I've reached out to so many different people at this point. And a lot of times when I reach out about different questions, I've tried to just play it based off that question. I've been reaching out lately just about cemeteries and the history and possibility that maybe there is another one between 1924 and 1957. But so far everyone's come back and been like, no, those are the three we know about. We don't know of any others. So right now, I think kind of based off the evidence we have, this is my best theory, is Joe Antrim is buried there. I mean, that's what I was told on the phone. And, hey, maybe we're wrong. This is kind of just in its like peer review stage. I grew up loving dinosaurs and wanting to become a paleontologist. There is a scientific method you got to follow, and we're really at that peer review stage. We've collected a lot of the evidence. We're waiting on maybe just like one or two things. We're trying to work on some stuff with the legal team, so hopefully we get that back soon. It's just crazy to think about. Like, we set out on this thing and all the evidence is pointing at this small cemetery, very headstoneless, like I said in the video. There is at least one marker thanking the people who donated to medical science, as well as a couple others. If you go there, there's like a inside fence. It is locked just because of the area it's in, and people hanging out and just messing with the cemetery and stuff like that. But if you go there and visit it, there's like an inside portion, like a chain link fence, and this is where we've been told that's where the medical remains were placed. It'd be awesome to get a marker for Joe, to remember Joe Antrim. to right the wrong of that Colorado reporter who said, "Who cares?" Well, we care, Joe. We do care, and Colorado cares. We're sorry that that reporter was terrible and didn't ask you any information or get any more on Billy or your guys' upbringing, where you were from, who your dad was. You could have solved so much stuff, but just know there are people that care. Colorado cares. Also, to give something back to the Billy the Kid world, who's been so gracious to us, means a lot. We've made a lot of friends doing this, and obviously I'd say John LeMay was probably the first in the Billy world. Without him, we probably wouldn't have been able to connect with as many people, and he's just been so good. We've obviously talked more than just Billy on the channel. Jarrell Vosberg, who we mentioned earlier, who played Billy the Kid, we met because of this. Of course, Josh Slatton and James Townsend from the Coalition, as well as the other Coalition members. I know I talked to Doss, and everyone that we've met with the Coalition has been wonderful. We were obviously invited recently to the ceremony for the historical marker of Stinking Springs, which we have a video coming out for that as well shortly. And what about our friend James Mills? He's been awesome. He's just so fun to talk with, and I'm sure outside of them I've forgotten people, but everyone we've met has really been really great. We haven't had too many bad interactions, and it's really cool to be able to give something back and solve something. It shows that there is still so much to learn. If anyone tells you there's not, don't listen. Go out there and research. I promise you, you will find something. There's always something to learn. You know, history isn't 100% set in stone, and you can make a difference. If we could find something so cool, I'm sure you guys can find something even better. Hey everyone, I forgot to tell you guys about the article and where to find it. So if you go to the Facebook page, you can find a more condensed version of the article, which will kind of just tell you about this investigation and the whole cemetery portion. At some point I will release like a director's cut, which I have written. It's like double the length, but it goes over more of the whole 3-year history. So just stay tuned to that, but for now, for today, go check out that on our Facebook page, Culz Paranormal Studios. But back to the video. But yeah, stay tuned. We'll have more. We'll be doing more with Joe Antrim stuff. This has been a long project. We want to do a lot more, but we wanted to really release this in time to remember him on the anniversary of his passing on November 25th. So we're glad that this is out and people are able to learn more about it. And like I said, we'll come to updates. Hey, if we are wrong and we find better evidence, we will let you know. But hopefully we're not. You know, feel pretty good on it currently, and yeah, hopefully we can get a marker placed in remembrance of Joe and mark some more of these spots in Colorado. Would be cool. At least to tell you guys more of the Billy's story and those who surround Billy and their story in our home state would be awesome. But yeah, if you want more of that, at some point to my left, just right below it though, is our current Billy the Kid playlist. So if you like anything Billy the Kid, just click that. For more about us here at Culz Paranormal Studios, we just did like a sports chat thingy, link right there. Don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe, and let us know what do you think about this. Tell us in the comments below, as well as is there any Colorado stories you want us to check out. Please let us know. We are happy to check it out. And wow.